The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
What can a polite Canadian say about last night's U.S. presidential debate or the race in general? Well, thankfully tonight we'll let the Americans do the talking. We've got 4 expats with us for their views from north of the 49th parallel on the presidential race that continues to astonish. Then, Nan Kiwanuka finds out from the New Yorker writer Maria Konniova why poker might be the perfect metaphor for life. It's Wednesday, September 30th, and that's next on The Agenda. While it can sometimes seem as if every Canadian has an opinion about U.S. politics, there are plenty of Americans in Canada who actually get a say in this U.S. presidential race. After last night's shit show between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, we thought we'd gather some expat Americans for their perspectives on this much-anticipated election. And with that, we welcome, in Whitby, Ontario, Morgan Campbell, freelance journalist and a dual citizen. In Thornhill, Ontario, Partha Mohanram, a professor at the University of Toronto and also a dual citizen. And here in the provincial capital on West Queen West, Kevin Bracken. He's the author of What's Different in Canada. And in Wellesley Village, Danielle Stampley, Toronto chapter chair of Democrats Abroad. And it's good to have all 4 of you on TVO this morning. You know, I don't know that in 15 years of doing this program, I've ever used any profanity on the air, but sometimes you just got to tell it like it is. And that was... Anyway, I said it. Enough. Let's move on. I want to start by just establishing what the 4 of you, what your relationship is with the United States. Danielle, why don't you start us off? Where are you from originally?
Sure. So I'm originally from Missouri, a little bit outside of St. Louis, and I came here about 6 years ago because I married a Canadian. And
you are or are not a dual citizen? You're not a dual citizen.
I'm a permanent resident currently.
Permanent resident. Got it. Okay. Kevin Bracken, how about you? Where are you from originally?
Sure. I'm from New York originally. I'm one of those Americans who threatened to move to Canada if George Bush was reelected, and I made good on my promise. And so I've lived here on and off since 2004. I'm an American citizen and a Canadian permanent resident.
You know Miss New York?
I mean, I love New York. Who doesn't? But sometimes living there is like a daily punch in the face. I think other New Yorkers might agree with me. So I love waking up in Toronto every day.
Okay, good enough. Partha, how about you?
So I'm originally from India. So I moved to the U.S. for my PhD, and I lived in the U.S. for 18 years. So I went through the normal process. I was a student, then I got an H-1B visa, then I got a green card, and I became a U.S. citizen. And as things turned out, in 2010, purely for professional reasons, I moved to Toronto, to the University of Toronto. So I can't say I fled to Canada anticipating Trump, but that's the way things have actually worked out. And so since I've been here for the past 10 years, we've become permanent residents. And so my entire family right now are, me, my wife, and our son are all dual U.S. Canadian citizens.
Do you have 3 passports, though?
No, India, unfortunately, doesn't allow you to keep your passport if you get another citizenship. So we have something called OCI. So it's like a document which allows me to go back to India freely without a visa and live there, work there, etc. But I'm not officially a citizen, so I can't vote and serve in the government, for example.
Gotcha. Okay. And Morgan, how about you?
I'm born and raised in Mississauga. I'm the son of American immigrants. My parents were born and raised and grew up in Chicago. Their parents all grew up in Chicago, and then their parents were from points across the South. So our roots run very, 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 very deep in the U.S., but I was born and raised in Mississauga.
And you went to university in the States, is that right?
Yeah, I went to Northwestern University right outside Chicago, and I was there at the height of the Jerry Springer era, which is to say what I thought I was going to see last night, turns out is what you guys all saw, but I had seen it all before in the 90s at Jerry Springer, so I didn't need to watch it again.
Yeah, we should point out you're the only person among the five of us here who did not watch the debate last night. So that's 2 hours of your life that you won't need to have back. Good for you. You ultimately made the right decision, I think. But I should follow up in all seriousness, Morgan, on given your deep roots in the States, why'd you come back to Canada after graduating from university?
Work. I was in the journalism industry. I'd interned at the Detroit News for a while. I had a job at this website in Boston. And then the Toronto Star was hiring for this year-long internship program. So it was the best way for me to work in a big city as a young journalist. So that was what I did. And I wound up sticking around at the Star for almost 20 years. Finished up at the Star last December. And now I'm writing a book and doing some other stuff.
Got it. Partha, you've been in Canada away from the United States for how long did you say? Was it 8 years?
No, it's been 10 years.
10 years, okay. How, in your view, have you seen the country you used to live in, the United States, where you have citizenship? How have you, in your view, seen it change over the intervening decade?
I think it's changed immeasurably, right? So if you just think about it, I left the US when you had a liberal president in Obama and you had Stephen Harper as the Prime Minister of Canada. And so obviously things have changed as Canada has moved to a more progressive leadership here with Trudeau and the Liberals. And obviously, to reuse a word you just used at the beginning, we all saw the shit show which happened in 2016 and the 4 years since then. So it's very interesting. I think Trump is both, there's like a self-fulfilling positive reinforcement here. I don't think Trump is responsible for all of America's ills. I think Trump is more representative of those ills, but he certainly feeds them. And therefore, in some sense, you've seen this, let's say, normalizing of, let's say, bigotry and hate, especially race-based hate and so on and so forth. And so, I find many things in my former country and the country I still hold a passport of, frankly unrecognizable.
And you, of course, could go back should a job or anything else want to take you back because you do have citizenship. Can you imagine going back right now?
Actually, it could happen. I mean, I don't foresee it happening in the short term simply because, I'm very happy at the University of Toronto and I love Toronto and I love Canada. But our son is in the final year of high school. And he will be applying to universities both in the US and Canada. So, and he's our only child. So assuming, let's say he goes to the US for university and he stays on there, I could foresee myself and ourselves going back. But then again, if he's, let's say, for example, if he works and lives in the Northeast, we are close enough. So I don't think we need to move. So yeah, potentially, yes. But if the US continues down the path it's going down, I'm not sure we want to go back.
So you're standing by and standing down for now, if I can pluck a line from last night.
Yeah, but please don't call me a proud boy.
Okay, gotcha. Well, you know what? I think everybody's actually champing at the bit to talk about what happened last night, and I know that there are people watching us right now who sort of expect us to talk about it. So let's go there. Danielle, you did watch the debate last night. What was your takeaway from it?
Well, I was thinking about it this morning, and it was sort of interesting because my impression is that it was a bit of the whole tableau was sort of an allegory for what our choices are as voters right now. It's pure chaos, a bully, a person who only cares about himself, and someone who is trying to bring some order and leadership to a situation that's turned pretty difficult. So that it was. I've used a lot of people have used different ways to describe it. It certainly was chaos. And I don't think, interestingly, Trump is behind right now in the polls. And what he needs is to persuade people that he has a plan and that he is going to be a leader and a president. And I don't think he convinced anybody last night of that. So from my perspective, even though, we didn't have an opportunity to hear a lot about what, Vice President Biden's plans are, anyone who is watching, I think you'd have to say that he came out ahead.
Now, you're from Missouri originally, so a red state. If you were living in Missouri today, how would you vote in the election in November?
Oh, I would. I already have voted. Actually, I voted by mail. That scary, dangerous process. Yeah,
you forgot to say fraudulent. Dangerous, scary, and fraudulent.
I think that one of the things that actually I feel hopeful about is that, overseas voters have been voting by mail for years and years and years. Military voters have been voting by mail for years, and it's never been an issue until now. And that's how we know that, this fear mongering is really baseless. And, frankly, I already have voted. I voted for Biden-Harris. I'm excited to see them take this country in another direction. And I hope that anyone who hasn't voted yet will be motivated to do so. It's really easy. If you're overseas, you can go to votefromabroad.org and get your ballot.
We have a graphic across the bottom of the screen. In that shot, I can see now that you're wearing a Biden-Harris button, but in the previous shot, which was just a single on you, it obscured the button, so I couldn't tell. But now I can see quite clearly that you're a Biden-Harris supporter, so okay, fine. Kevin, how about you? If you were living in New York, let me guess. If you were living in New York City right now, who would you be voting for?
Obviously, Biden-Harris is my choice for president and vice president. Although New Yorkers do have the unique ability to support a third party in somewhat limited numbers without worrying about whether they're going to throw off the election. And so you have the option to vote third party if that's what you choose, without really having to worry about the chaos that ensues. But honestly, I think last night, the purpose, I think, and Trump's tactics are actually to persuade undecided voters not to vote. I think it's been pretty well established that in the case of low voter turnout, the Republicans could win because of gerrymandering, because of voter suppression. And if there is a low voter turnout, I think it is, and if that is ensured by sort of the people's distaste in the conduct of the debates, then that could actually ensure a Trump victory.
Kevin, what did you learn last night?
I think that the only person that really talked about policy substantively was Chris Wallace. He was the only person that really talked about Biden's climate plan, and that's really the only dose of policy discussion we got last night at all. And so otherwise, though, I think convincing people not to vote is the only thing that Trump has. And I think that we really ought to be focused on how can we craft a get out the vote campaign that addresses the people's sort of desire to stay home.
Partha, you watched the debate. What did you think?
I'd like to summarize this debate by a sort of cartoon somebody forwarded me. Actually, it was a tweet by Trevor Noah, which says, "Now we know why kindergarten teachers in the US are the most underpaid," because that's what I watched. I watched a kindergarten fight, right? But I was very happy with the way Biden handled it, because if he had just stood by and let Trump get away with whatever he was trying to do, people would have come after Biden saying that, see, this guy can't handle it, and he doesn't have the gumption to face Trump. So I think unfortunately the debate did descend to the level that it did. But I'm happy that Biden went down to the trenches. As far as the debate was concerned, I think it was awful. And, I felt like changing the channel in 5 minutes. And the only reason I didn't was this sort of combination of this masochism that, you do things even though they are painful to yourself. And also the sense that I knew this is really important. And so I just wanted to watch the end of it. But what I couldn't watch the debates on CNN and Fox for more than 5 minutes. I just switched to TSN after that, because there's only a limit to how much you can take. So as far as the debate is concerned, I agree with the points about turnout. See, the strange thing about the US election system is only the votes in like 6 or 7 states count. So I make a point. I have my ballot right here. This is the New York State ballot, which I printed out, and I intend to obviously vote for Biden-Harris and send back. And so does my wife. But our votes don't count. It's purely symbolic, because New York's a blue state. Similarly, if you're from a deep red state, your vote doesn't count. It's those 6 or 7, crucial swing states, and that's everybody's attention, like the Ohios, the Michigans, the Pennsylvanias, the Floridas, and so on and so forth. But that's the strange system that the US has, with the combination of it's two things. It's the Electoral College and the fact that most states are winner take all. So even with the Electoral College, if states were awarding their electors proportionally, you wouldn't have this apathy for the vast majority of the country. And, you'd actually have a functional democracy, but we don't.
Just to clarify, your vote obviously counts, but what you're saying is that you know 4 years ahead of Election Day that New York is going to go blue. California is going to go blue. There's only a small handful of battleground states which are actually, quote unquote, in play. That's what you mean, yes?
Absolutely. The Electoral College votes for New York, for California, and similarly for, let's say, Mississippi or Alabama, they're locked in. So a handful of people voting one way or the other really doesn't matter. But a handful of people who do vote or don't vote or stay away from voting in places like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida, and a few other states. They determine the outcome of the entire election, and therefore they determine things like who gets to sit in the Supreme Court and so on and so forth.
Right. Morgan, I do have to say, tens of millions of people did watch that debate last night, and maybe some of them tuned in to hear about the issues, but I'm betting a bunch tuned in just to see the train wreck that they knew would take place. Why did you not feel any obligation to sort of watch that thing last night?
Why do I feel an obligation to watch a train wreck? Like, you guys should all I shouldn't have to explain to you why I didn't watch something, again, whose outcome was determined. Like, Donald Trump does not have a lot to sell in terms of policy, in terms of his accomplishments. So all he's going to do is make this thing as sensational as possible. And so I'm a guy, I have a lot to do, right? I got an 18-month-old daughter. You might hear her crying in the background. I'm trying to write a book. My time is very compressed. I got to wake up at probably 3:45 every morning to get any work done. So then I don't have 90 minutes at nighttime to watch something that I already know how it's going to turn out. And to Kevin's point, Trump's only hope is to make the debates so pointless that anyone who is undecided doesn't vote. Because the truth is, anyone who, after 4 years of Donald Trump, 1 month and 1 week out from the election, who is still waiting for Donald Trump to do or say the one thing that will convince them to vote for Donald Trump, already wants to vote for Donald Trump. So the number of actual undecided voters is even smaller than I think what we're talking about. So there was not anything in the debate for me. There was nothing for me to learn.
Are you registered to vote in the United States?
I got my ballot right here. I'm about to fill it out after we get off this call.
Okay, what state are you registered in?
Massachusetts, because that's the last state I lived.
So once again, that is about the bluest of blue states in the United States. So, again, we don't want to say your vote doesn't count, but you already know that that state's going to go Biden-Harris. Does that take any joy out of the election for you?
To an extent, yes, because basically every vote after the deciding vote doesn't count. So if there's a million voters, 500,001 vote for one candidate. After that 500,001, it could be 200,000 more voters vote for that one candidate, but their votes don't count because, as we've discussed, it's winner take all. All you got to do is win by one vote, which is why Trump's claims of voter fraud in California fall so flat. Because if you are trying to rig an election, you're trying to win by 2 or 3 votes in Alabama or South Carolina. You're not trying to win by 3 million votes in California because those extra votes don't get you anything.
Now, let me say for the record at this point that I've asked all 4 of you how you either have or intend to vote, and you've all 4 said you either have or would vote for the Democratic ticket. And the producer of this segment, I want to go to bat for her because she tried like HE double hockey sticks to find some Republicans in Canada who were prepared to go on the air and defend a vote for Trump and could not. Now, that's not as shocking as it sounds because we know polls have been done here in Canada on how would you vote if you did have a vote in the U.S. election. And we know that the surveys say anything from 85 to 90% of the people would vote for the Democratic ticket as opposed to the Republican ticket. But I want to put that on the record right now because obviously we have 4 guests today who are very reflective of the Canadian scene, but we don't have 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, as we might normally have on a discussion for that reason. So I put that out there for people's edification, for what it's worth. I want to know this, Danielle, right now things look not bad for the Democratic ticket, but of course there's still more than a month to go, and we know that things can change, and the polls are a reflection of what people thought yesterday, not a reflection of what they're going to do in 4 or 5 weeks. So my question is, if Trump wins re-election, what do you think?
There was an interesting piece today in the New York Times. It was an op-ed about how what we're voting on right now is basically the future of American democracy. And in my view, if Trump wins, we are basically sealing the fate that democracy will no longer hold. And, I think that's it sounds dramatic, but I can tell you that when 2016 was happening and people were saying that they didn't think it was possible for Trump to win, I was in Milwaukee canvassing and helping voters vote because the voter ID laws in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin are terrible and meant to keep people from voting. And it was devastating because people didn't appreciate the choice they were making then. And I think it would be even worse now because we do know, we have his record, we know what's happened in the past 4 years, and the choice is clear, and we know he can win. So, from my perspective, it is possible for him to win, but I don't like to imagine that reality because I think that, like I said, I think democracy in the United States will collapse as we know it. I think it's important, though, to point out that the presidential office is not the only one on the ballot right now. And, we've seen a lot right now about the Supreme Court nomination coming up. And, American voters will be voting also on a lot of Senate races. And the senators also have a huge influence in what laws we pass, who's held accountable. I mean, I think we can see right now, Mitch McConnell is not holding President Trump accountable. The Republican senators are not holding President Trump accountable. And that's a huge part of the way that the American system is supposed to work. There's supposed to be a check on that power, and it's not functioning. So, that also will be that's an important factor in what happens next and how those down ballot races turn out. And there's a lot of battleground states and there are a lot of offices right now where people aren't sitting too comfortable. So, I don't think anything is certain.
Kevin, same question to you. If Trump wins, what?
I believe that there is guaranteed to be a certain amount of violence in the streets following Election Day. It's heartbreaking as an American to see my home country and see that I believe that there is going to be some kind of armed conflict during this period of uncertainty about the actual ballot count.
You're saying regardless of who wins?
Regardless of who wins, yes, because it seems almost guaranteed that because of when the mail-in ballot count begins, there is going to be some amount of uncertainty in at least a couple of states, I believe, and a sort of form of Bush v. Gore, I believe, will play out again. I think it's almost guaranteed that Trump will try to use litigation and sue possibly all 50 states over their election results. So I think no matter what happens, yes, there is guaranteed to be some amount of violence in the streets. If Trump is ultimately found to be the victor, personally, I don't see that as a totally unexpected outcome. Again, just because of gerrymandering, voter suppression laws, and people's general disinterest, I think. And I feel like that there are definitely voters out there who have a very difficult time distinguishing between the two. I know that it sounds preposterous, but again, I've been to 48 U.S. states, and I can tell that that if there is one kind of white guy in his 70s, another white guy in his 70s, and their policies are not radically different in the same way that somebody like Bernie Sanders might have brought, then I think a lot of people are actually just not going to vote. And to me, I think that's actually the greatest risk of this election.
Partha, how about you on that question?
See, I think it's quite likely that Trump will win, although the indicators suggest that he probably will not. But as the last panelist basically said, Trump has basically thrown the whole thing into turmoil by saying that there's so much fraud in this, and the fact that the postal ballots will take some time to count is going to add to that confusion. Now, obviously, all of us were overconfident that Hillary Clinton was going to win in 2016, so it's important not to discount the real possibility that Trump might actually win. The other thing to keep in mind here is, there is a big difference between voters on the left and voters on the right. Voters on the right are extremely pragmatic. They are willing to overlook, for example, the evangelical vote and stuff. They're able to overlook all aspects of Trump's personal life as long as he delivers a conservative majority in the Supreme Court, right? And this recent unfortunate passing of RBG, it's unclear how it's going to affect the election. It might energize people on the left. It might also energize people on the right because Trump has delivered a conservative Supreme Court. And Trump, unless he changes the law and declares himself president for life and stuff, which, by the way, I can't completely rule out, his term is going to end in 4 years' time, worst case, right? But the Supreme Court people, especially, you appoint somebody who's in their 40s and stuff, these people stay for like 3 or 4 generations, right? So the voters on the right are extremely pragmatic and they vote for goals and aims. The left, on the other hand, always is, trying to find flaws with its own candidates. Like Biden is not progressive enough. And Trump tried that yesterday, right? He tried to pin the, you don't support the Green New Deal and stuff. And Biden was a little weak there. He said, no, I don't support it. I support my plan for the environment and so on and so forth. So I think the problem is people on the left or centrists or progressives, moderates, whatever, they also need to develop a sense of, expediency. Don't vote for the perfect candidate. Vote for the better candidate of the two you have. So, if you have two not middle-aged, 70 plus old white men, vote for the 70 plus old white man who will do the right thing.
Brian Mulroney always used to say, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative.
Absolutely.
Okay, Morgan, talk to me about this for a second. One of the things, or I guess it's part of conventional wisdom in the United States today, is that some people are actually a little afraid, maybe a little embarrassed, to acknowledge to pollsters that they support Trump. And therefore, his support, so goes the argument, is understated in current polling. Do you buy that?
No.
So what we see is what we get, eh?
I think what we see is what we get. And think about this, because we get polls mixed up with the outcome of the election. And Trump won the election and the Electoral College not in the popular vote. So the polls didn't tell us last time out that Hillary Clinton would win the election. They told us that Hillary would get more votes. And Hillary Clinton did get more votes. She got a lot more votes in spite of a really thorough and wide-ranging campaign of voter suppression, disinformation, all these different techniques that Trump and his allies from Russia used to keep Black people from voting, brown people from voting, Asian people from voting, et cetera. And so what I think this time around is that there are fewer Trump voters than ever. Like right now, he is down to like his base. It's amazing that this base is still, 35% of the population. But I don't buy for a second that there's this silent majority of Trump voters. Like I think what we're going to see, regardless of who wins the Electoral College, and regardless of all these new techniques and this renewed effort to suppress votes and stop people from voting by mail and get rid of mail-in ballots. I think what we're going to see in November, either way, regardless of who wins the Electoral College, is Joe Biden getting a lot more votes than Donald Trump.
Okay, I would like to pivot in our conversation right now. And Morgan, while you have the floor, I'll start with you. We happen to be living at a moment of historic racial reckoning in North America, but particularly in the United States. I guess you could start this most recent chapter of America's racial reckoning with the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. I guess it was 4 months ago. And Morgan, I wonder if there's a part of you that wishes you were in the United States right now, fighting, working, championing, trying to make something happen on that issue right now.
Sort of. Because like for me, I don't see the border as like a wall, and there is no wall, despite what Donald Trump said he was going to do. I see it more as a membrane, a semi-permeable membrane, and I go back and forth. So I like my consciousness, my identity there's not like this clean cleaving between my American half and my Canadian half. I am American and I am Canadian. So right now, I do feel a bit of like survivor's remorse for being here and relatively safe when I have family in Chicago and family in Grand Rapids and family across the U.S. But like if you're asking me, what would I give up my house, my family, my everything I have to go fight in the street? No, I don't know that that's a fair question to ask somebody, but I will tell you this, is that my parents left the United States when the country was undergoing upheaval similar to what we see today. They left in 1969, and they were just like Kevin, very similar to Kevin. They looked for reasons to continue to have faith in the United States and continue to have faith that white people in the United States would wake up and do better by their fellow citizens. and then they killed Martin Luther King. And listen, when I tell you, like, Martin Luther King was the second last straw, and then they elected Richard Nixon. So my parents said, you know what are we staying here for? And I told you this last time I was here, Steve, like the United States is rapidly turning into one of these countries that people leave to come to the United States or come to Canada. Like, it has all the hallmarks. You have a ruler that's trying to install himself as a ruler for life with these autocratic leanings. You have violent repression of ethnic minorities. You have ethnic minorities having their democratic rights stripped from them or otherwise suppressed. These are the factors that drive people to the U.S. These are the factors that drive people to Canada, and it's happening in the U.S. And so, do I wish I was there right now fighting? Sort of, but at the same time, like, a lot of my family is here, and I can't risk my life when I got a little baby daughter at home. That doesn't make sense. And so, I don't know if that answers your question, but no, I'm not going to give up what I have right now to.
It sure does. I totally understand where you're coming from. And with a couple of minutes left to go in our discussion, Danielle, let me put the same question to you. Is there a part of you that wishes you were carrying a placard in the streets of St. Louis these days, fighting for racial equality and social justice?
Yeah, actually there is. I mean, I think it's, Morgan has made a good point, and he and I are in different situations. Like, the feeling that I feel is not necessarily that I would want to relocate back there, but that if it weren't COVID times, that I would like the opportunity to travel back there and stand in solidarity with the people who are in the streets there and, use my position of privilege to support them. Like, I think that being from that area, having my family has, my father grew up, in the next neighborhood over from Ferguson. Like, we have friends who, tell us, like, they can't come visit us from those neighborhoods because they'll get pulled over by the cops because they're Black and they're going to a white neighborhood. Like, that reality is a reality that I can't tolerate. And if I appreciate that I have an opportunity and a responsibility in some respects to support this movement. And I wish I could be there for that. I do what I can here, but it's not the same.
Understood. I've got a minute left. Partha, I should give it to you to weigh in on the same issue.
See, I personally have to say that, living in the US and now in Canada as a brown person, I personally haven't experienced, or at least I don't think I've experienced racism. Your producer asked me about this. And so I lived in Boston and New York. I experienced a lot of rudeness. Okay, those cities are known for being notoriously rude. I love both cities, by the way. I'm still a Red Sox fan, and Steve, I think we've talked about this. However, I noticed that people are just being rude to everyone. So it's just a New York or Boston thing. They weren't being selectively rude to me because I'm Asian or Indian or whatever. So, but one thing I want to say is, there's a sense of almost self-congratulatory attitude amongst Canadians saying that, hey, we are not American. Okay, and I see the same thing for people from other countries. But there's lots of bad stuff happening all over the world, including in Canada. So rather than being self-congratulatory about what's wrong in the US, right, I think it's important that we kind of shine a lens or take a mirror to ourselves and try to fix those same kind of problems at home. So I still remember when the Black Lives Matter movement in Canada interrupted the Pride Parade like 3 or 4 years ago, they were criticized. But then as things have come out, we see that there's problems in policing in Canada as well. Maybe it's not as extreme as the US because this is a more sort of moderate country. But it's important that as Canadians, we use the US as a warning of what we can become if we are not careful and take steps to fix things. I think rather than constantly bitch and moan about how bad the US is.
Yeah, Canadian smugness is not one of our better qualities, so I appreciate you bringing that up. Danielle, Kevin, Partha, Morgan, it's awfully good of all four of you to join us on TVO tonight. And stay safe out there. And I'd kind of like to hang out with the four of you on November 3rd just to watch you watch election night, but we'll see how that all goes. Take good care, everybody.
Do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What plays the bigger part in life, luck or skill? And how much control do we have, if any? Maria Konniova took her PhD in psychology and her writing skills to the poker table to find out, and won. Well, we all win since it's produced her new book, The Biggest Bluff, How I Learned to Pay Attention, Master Myself, and Win. Maria Konniova is also contributing writer for the New Yorker magazine, and she's with us now on the line from Vermont. Hi, Maria.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
I'm so excited to chat with you. I loved the book. I think I'm going to keep it on my bedside table. But you went to an Ivy League school, have a successful career as a writer with The New Yorker. Where did the idea to take a year off come from to learn poker?
Originally, it had nothing to do with poker, and I didn't know that poker was going to be the route I would eventually take. I became fascinated by the role that chance plays in our lives, and it was a personal fascination. A lot of things went wrong at around the same time, and about everything that you think can go wrong went wrong. I mean, my health just fell apart. My grandmother died. Multiple people in my family lost their jobs. Just all of these things within 1 month, one right after the other. They forced me to really take a step back and realize how big a role chance plays in a day-to-day life, and that we can work hard and do our best, and that will only get us so far. We also have to get lucky. Things also have to go our way. And I wanted to write about that. I wanted to explore it. I wanted to figure out, how do you learn to tell the difference? How do you learn to maximize the things that you can have agency over while not letting the things that are outside of your control drag you down? And that eventually brought me to poker as a way of exploring this.
I think too, when we have success, when we have success in our lives, I don't know if we're really saying, why am I being so successful? Oh, me. It's only when bad things happen. So what role does the ego play when we are trying to decipher whether our success is due to luck or to hard work?
Huge, huge. I mean, our ego is just overwhelming, and it's so tempting to say when things go well, I'm a genius, I'm brilliant, yep, I knew that was going to happen. Then when things go poorly, we have so many excuses. Oh, you know what? No one could have predicted this, and no one could have predicted that. It was out of my hands. All of a sudden, we're not such a big shot anymore, but it's all other things. If it were just up to us, we'd be totally successful. There's so many psych studies about this that show that if you ask people these questions, if you put them in these sorts of situations, they'll take credit for success, and they'll blame other people, other things, other externalities for failure. That's not true. That's not actually reality. I think that it's always a mixture of both. You know, you have to do well, but you also have to get lucky. And when things don't go your way, a lot of times it's your fault too. Yes, you got unlucky, but it's also your fault, and you have to learn those lessons the hard way. Our ego blinds us. We don't want to hear that. We just want to move on with life.
So a lot of us, when we think of poker, it's gambling, it's a game. And you said that you had no experience playing card games. At one point, you didn't know how many cards are in a deck. I didn't either until I read your book. But yet you decide to spend a year of your life learning to play and master poker. Why poker specifically?
Well, I got the idea from one of the legends of the 20th century, John von Neumann, who was just this brilliant mind, total polymath, the father of the computer. So you and I would not be able to have this interview without him. Also the father of game theory, also one of the inventors of the hydrogen bomb. So lots of things that this guy was responsible for, some better than others. But he was a poker player. And in his book, The Theory of Games and Economic Behavior, which is the foundational text of game theory, he writes that poker was actually the basis of game theory, and that the reason that he chose poker was that because to him, it embodied what strategic decision making was in life, because both poker and life are games of incomplete information. What that means is that there are things I know, there are things you know, there are things we know in common, and then what we have to do is make the best decision we possibly can based on limited information, and information that will never be complete. So we have to make decisions in an uncertain environment, and we need to know that it's always going to be probabilistic. There's no such thing as certainty. There's no such thing as 100%. That's life. That's poker. And to me, when I read that, I thought, wow, this is really interesting. Maybe poker is a way into a lot of the themes that I want to talk about. And there was one more thing he wrote. He said, real life consists of bluffing, of little tactics of deception, of trying to figure out, what does this man think I mean to do? And that's what games are about in my theory. And as a psychologist, that really appealed to me. I thought, yes, exactly. For a mathematician to realize that you need psychology, you need the human element, that it can't all be reduced down to numbers. To me, that was groundbreaking, and that made me want to learn more about poker.
Chess, I think, is a board game that everybody holds to a certain, people talk about chess. If you can play chess, you're a genius, you're fantastic and all that. How is poker different from other games that we play in casinos or even something like chess?
So von Neumann, like me, did not like chess. I'm so glad that he and I shared that because that makes me feel slightly better. And he found chess boring. And the reason he found chess boring was because it's a game of perfect information. There's a board, you see all the pieces, you see all the permutations, and theoretically, with enough computing power, there's always a right move. So there's always something that you can do. And it's a game that's solvable, and indeed that's been solved. Poker and life are not like that. Those are games of incomplete information. So imagine a chessboard, but now you can't see what pieces are there. And all of a sudden, something you thought was the queen, voila, it's revealed to be a bishop or something else. That's life. Life is based on uncertainties, on probabilities, on strategy that is not coming from this perfectly laid out board. There is no solution in poker. No limit hold'em still has not been solved. Now, on the other side, you have games like roulette, the other games in a casino, and that's at the other end of the extreme. So those are games that are just absolute chance. There's no skill involved. And that is also boring, according to von Neumann, because you can't do anything. The outcome is going to be what it's going to be. And that's also not life. But that is much more gambling. And poker's in the middle, and poker is a game of skill, and it's not gambling. And I spent many, many days and hours and weeks trying to figure out, how do I explain in one sentence why poker is a skill game? Because so many people ask me that. And I think it comes down to the fact that in poker, you can win with the worst hand and you can lose with the best hand. And that's not possible in any other game in a casino.
Well, I think for me as a parent, I've been trying to teach my kids chess since they were very little. But you've actually said that you think that poker should be taught to kids in grade 1. Why?
I have said that, and I believe very strongly in it, because I think that poker teaches you skills that are absolutely essential for thriving as an adult, for being a good thinker, for being a critical thinker. And by the way, I think kids should learn chess too. Why not learn both? That's great. I never learned chess. All I know is how the pieces move. And so I think that chess can teach you something interesting as well. But what poker teaches you is strategy on a different level. It teaches you to be comfortable with uncertainty, with not knowing. It teaches you about probabilities because you learn what different probabilities are like. You actually learn the types of things that are so hard for the human brain to learn otherwise because you're doing them, you're experiencing, you're learning the way that we learn best, through doing. And you're actually figuring out, what does it feel like to be a 2% favorite, to be a 70% favorite. Oh, I can be a huge favorite and still lose. That happens, and that doesn't mean I made the wrong decision. Fascinating. Poker teaches you emotional control and self-regulation, which is something that we've seen that if you learn as a little kid can actually help you thrive throughout your adult life, because you have to learn, how do I not take this personally? How do I get past my losses? How do I actually learn to control my emotions and to still think rationally, even though I might be upset? Poker teaches you to read other people, which in a poker context will help you beat them, but in a real life context can help you be much more empathetic, a better listener, someone who actually pays attention to the signs that other people are giving off, both verbal and nonverbal, which I think would be huge. I mean, imagine how much better society would be if we actually listened to each other and listened to the subtext of what people were saying. Oh, wow, she's uncomfortable. Oh, wow, he's feeling very angry for some reason. Those types of skills, I think, will get you incredibly far and will make you into just a better human being. And you learn that all at the poker table.
Well, in what ways does poker mimic real life?
Well, I think that most importantly is something that I've already touched on, which is that it is a game of imperfect information. So in real life, whenever you make a decision, we always want to know more, but we can never know everything because we don't know what other people are thinking. We don't know what other people know. All we know is what they're projecting, what they're telling us, what they're showing us. But there's so much else that's involved, and we aren't privy to it. We need to learn to be comfortable with that and to try to make the best decision possible, knowing that we don't know everything. And we also need to try to calibrate just how certain we are of different elements of our decision process, which we're not used to doing. I mean, so many people just say, oh yeah, definitely this is the way to go. Well, in poker, you're actually forced to bet. And so you actually have to put money on these sorts of decisions. And so all of a sudden you have to ask yourself, wait, how certain am I? Am I 10% certain? Am I 30% certain? Am I 50% certain? Those are all very different levels of certainty. And by the way, I'm not the first person to say that. Immanuel Kant, way back when, who was also a gambler and wanted to be a professional gambler at one point in his life, he writes very eloquently about how important it is to actually put kind of a monetary value on your opinions, on your certainty, because then you actually are forced to question how right you are, how good your information is, how good your thought process was, and ask yourself, okay, am I willing to bet $10 on this, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, my marriage, my life? And all of a sudden, I think people become much more humble.
Because you have something to lose, right?
You have something to lose, exactly.
One of the aha moments that I had reading this book is that you write that probability has amnesia. What did you mean by that?
I meant that we have this very simplistic view of what probability is supposed to look like. So let me take the simplest example, which is a coin toss. We know that a coin has heads and tails. So 50% of the time it lands heads and 50% tails. So if you flip it twice and it lands on heads both times, that's not so surprising. But if you flip it 10 times and it lands on heads every single time, you think, whoa, this is wrong. It's supposed to be landing on tails too. Well, the coin doesn't know that you're sitting there and you're waiting for it to land on tails because it's already landed on heads. It doesn't know that it's 50-50. And yes, over time, if we flip it 1,000,000 times, it's going to be closer to 50-50. But 10 times in a row, sure, that can be all heads or all tails. And it's so funny because to us, something like that looks unnatural. We say, oh, this is rigged. This isn't normal. Well, real probability actually looks normal. And what is usually rigged is when it looks the way that we think it's going to look. Something I learned when researching The Biggest Bluff, I talked to a man who actually designs games, and he taught me that in a lot of games, the random number generators, the probability distributions, are rigged to look more random to the average human, because when they had it be truly random, people complained and said, this game is horrible, this game is rigged, you can never win here, I can't believe I'm losing 20 times in a row. So they realized, wow, human brains don't like what probability actually looks like, the fact that it has amnesia and that every single outcome is totally independent. So let's make it resemble what people's intuition is like a little bit more. And if they're losing, let's get them a win. Let's actually jigger things a little bit so that the numbers look like their perceptions of what probability should look like. Now, poker doesn't do that. Poker doesn't pander to you. Poker actually forces you to confront the fact that probability does have amnesia, and that you might be on a losing streak for a very long time or on a winning streak. Although everyone seems to be okay with being on a winning streak, all of a sudden then that looks just fine.
I deserve. I worked hard. We are running out of time, and I wish we had more time to talk, but I have a bunch of questions to get in. I'm going to skip ahead. And in the book, you write about someone, and you call them generously, I think, aggressive idiot. Can you tell us the story of aggressive idiot?
Yes, I mean, I called him a little bit more than that, but we will call him for the audience aggressive idiot. So just by way of background, poker is 98% male. Just imagine that for a second. You are, as a woman, you can go days and days and days not playing with any men. And it turns out that oftentimes men don't like playing with women. And so I started off playing online because that's the way that you can really get a lot of experience very quickly. And I wanted to mimic what it would be like for me in real life. So I chose a screen name that made it obvious that I was female. And my avatar, which is, the little face that appears whenever anyone plays with me, was a little puppy. So I tried to make myself, as cute and female as I possibly could. And we know that actually online, there's a lot of data to support this. Men will bluff more against women. And so I had played with people before, and online you can actually tag people and label them. And I'd played with this person before, and he was very nasty to me and was very aggressive and would always bully me. And so I labeled him as an aggressive idiot because he was aggressive against me and he was idiotically so. It was just over the top. And so this was my breakthrough moment when I was playing with him, and I realized, wow, you're going to underestimate me and you're going to be aggressive no matter what. So why don't I wait until I actually have a strong hand and let you give me all of my money? And that's exactly what I did. I let him bluff at me, and I would fold. And I didn't take it personally. I would say, okay, it's fine. I'm not in a position to fight back. Then finally I had a very strong hand and I knocked him out of the tournament, and I went on to win my first ever online poker tournament. And then I thank Aggressive Idiot in the book for giving me that opportunity.
Well, what I find so interesting about this book is that you look at yourself really from a critical point of view. And as you're learning, you realize that you have a lot to overcome internally. What did you discover about yourself in terms of your struggle to play more aggressively?
Yeah, it's something that I'm still dealing with. I started off not realizing just how much I'd internalized a lot of the roles, a lot of the stereotypes that society puts on you as a female. I'd always thought of myself as a pretty strong woman. I've had career success, I've done well, and I thought I could stand up for myself. And what I discovered at the poker table was that that was absolutely not true. That I had learned to act in certain ways to minimize tension because I wanted people to like me. I wanted people to think well of me. And in order to do that, I wanted to not get in their way and to avoid aggression, to avoid conflict. And so I found myself at the poker table doing just that. I found myself folding when people were bullying me around, saying, okay, you can take it. I don't need it that much. You just take it, because I didn't want them to, I didn't want that conflict at the table. When I had very strong hands, I wouldn't raise as aggressively. I would make less money even with my good cards, because I wouldn't want them to say, oh, I hate her. That's that nasty Maria girl who always raises me. I didn't want that either. And it was very hard for me to be aggressive, because whenever I was aggressive, people would say not nice things to me and would make me feel like I didn't really belong there. And I totally felt like an imposter as well. And so this it was not a pleasant realization, and I was losing a lot of money. And it made me confront the fact that, wow, I actually have internalized a lot of these social stereotypes and these norms of behavior, and I don't like myself for it. That's not who I want to be. And so I had to work hard to try to overcome that and to try to figure out, okay, you underestimate me. How do I not let you bully me? How do I use that against you? How do I actually turn it on its head so that I can win? And when I did that.
Sorry, and you do win. And not to be rude by talking about money, but what was the biggest pot to date that you've won?
So I play tournament poker. And so it's not a cash game where there are these huge pots, because chips have no cash value. The biggest tournament I ever won, with all of the with the total prizes and everything, was a little over $100,000. I think the actual cash prize was 80-something thousand, maybe 85, and then there was also a $30,000 pass attached to it, which let me play in the biggest buy-in event I've ever played in my life, a $25,000 tournament, which is crazy to me, because my first salary out of college as a writer was $23,000. So the entry to this one tournament was more than my first annual salary.
Well, the great thing about this book is that you learned so much about the game, but the game itself teaches you skills that maybe could have come in handy earlier on in life. Looking back in that process, that year process, what would you say was the best lesson, maybe the most helpful lesson that you wish you could have learned earlier?
Oh, there are so many of them. But I think that the one that is the most important in how you make decisions is to learn to focus on the process, on the things that you can control, and to let go of the outcome. Because the outcome is just chance. You can't control that. How do I put myself in a position to win? How do I put myself in a position to get lucky? And I do that by focusing on my decisions, on my emotions, on my actions, on my reactions. I don't do that by dwelling on the things that went wrong or by taking credit for the things that went right that had nothing to do with me. And learning that difference and learning to not judge myself based on the outcome, but based on the process, I think is very important. And also to learn that about other people. I think it makes you much less judgmental of others once you realize that, you know what, people did not necessarily make bad decisions if they are in a bad place and had bad outcomes. They might have made just as good a decision as you. You got lucky, they didn't. It's something that's just so important to remember all the time. And I think that playing poker has actually made me just much more grateful and much more cognizant of the role that chance plays in everyone's life. And it's made me really want to make sure that when I'm lucky, that I pay that forward, that I actually use those opportunities to try to give some of that luck to as many people as I possibly can.
We have about 30 seconds, but did your Baba Anya eventually come around to you playing poker?
You know what? I hope so. I had a chance to see her very briefly right before all the lockdowns started for her 95th birthday in March. In February, and then March we were locked down. And she, for the first time, said, you know, I think that poker has taught you a lot and has opened up lots of doors for you. And so I think that she finally might have gotten it. And that makes me very happy.
Maria, thank you so much for your time. Terrific book. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been an absolute pleasure.
And that is the agenda for Wednesday, September 30th, 2020. Apropos of our last segment, it does take more than good luck to keep a democracy in good form. Tomorrow, we'll hear from the contributors to a new collection of essays aimed at getting citizens involved in reviving democratic practice around the globe. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.